I've got a drink of water, but I think I've left it out.
Oh, no, sure, Anne. Yes, of course. Yeah. It's absolutely fine.
Oh, I've lost it. I'll have to manage that. It's all right. It doesn't matter. Oh, there it is.
Are you sure, Anne?
It's just fine, yeah. I left it on the shelf back there.
Okay, right then. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Anne Chapman from Morecambe Renewable Energy.
Morecambe Bay Community Renewables.
Sorry, Morecambe Bay Renewable
Community
Renewables. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to also remember the title of your talk, which is a Community Renewable Energy Project.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to talk about more renewables and about doing community energy and all that sort of stuff.
Thank you, Anne. I'm just kind of multitasking this. So this is again another kind of joint LancsCan SustainNet webinar. This is our second one of the academic year. My name is Professor Christopher Dent, and I'm going to hand over now to Marcello, who's going to also just say something about himself before we then hand over to Anne. Thank you, Marcello. I'd like to say a few words.
You're on mute.
You're right. Sorry about that. So, hello everyone. My name is Marcello Trovati, Professor of Computer Science at Yale University, and it's my pleasure to introduce Anne Chapman, who's the Director of More Renewables. And so, I can provide a short introduction of your talk, but if you want, you can do it yourself.
I just start off.
Yeah.
Right, can I share my screen?
Yes, you may.
So, I think I might have sorted it out. Oh, edit my view. Can you see this?
Yes, we can, Anne. Thank you.
I'll get rid of that. So if I go to slideshow, sorry, I'll get there. Right, can you see that?
Yeah, that's all good.
And I can't see any of you. So we're called Morecambe Bay Community Renewables, or More Renewables for short. And this is partly because there's an organisation called LESS, or it used to stand for something LESS, but then we dropped what it stood for, which works in Lancaster District on promoting sustainable living. And I used to be a director of that. And it was sort of LESS that then set up More, but we're More Renewables, or Morecambe Bay Community Renewables in our more longer form. So there you've got a nice picture of Lancaster, where we're all based, looking out over Morecambe Bay towards Blackcomb in the background. So we set up in 2011. We're a community benefit society, and our aim, I mean, partly because I was a director of LESS, and we ran a home energy service. So we went round and helped people with how to make their homes more energy efficient, or how to live in them so that they didn't use so much energy. And I knew, because I went to lots of conferences and things and engaged with what's happening elsewhere, I knew that people in other parts of the country were setting up these societies, these community energy organisations, to do renewable energy and to and part of the idea of those was to provide funding for energy efficiency work. So that was my motivation, to get some funding for which you've got to help people reduce their energy use, which is the last on my list there. And I think that's a little lesson that I'll get in now, which is about, if you're interested in this sort of stuff, go to events and conferences and find out what's happening elsewhere, because you never need to, you mustn't think that you've got to do something incredibly innovative. I think it's always like, if you just take what somebody else is doing and doing it in your place, that's often good enough. So So we were the first, so our aims that you've got there, this was our initial ideas in 2011. We wanted to develop lots of renewable energy installations we said we were working in the Morecambe Bay area. So that's how we defined our community for the Community Benefit Society. And the aim of that was to reduce emissions and also we wanted, I say, provide a return to our investors, because it was perhaps a better way of putting it would be to give people something good to do with their money. Don't forget, this is just after the, a few years after the financial crash, and we'd all become more aware of all the awful things the banks were doing and how risky they were treating our money and that sort of stuff. So I wanted something to provide people with a way to take their money out of the banks and put it into doing something good, and then to help funding to reduce energy use. So they were our ideas when we set off. So, and this is our plan. So we've got, on the left hand there, you start off with the investors, the members, the people out there that we're going to go out and get investment from in the form of shares, and then they become members of More Renewables, and it's the members that control the organisation that vote at the AGM. And then we've got More Renewables, our organisation. It says the cooperative. We started off being a cooperative, but then for various reasons to do with changes in legislation and the attitude of the Financial Conduct Authority, who registers and sort of regulates societies, we changed to a community benefit society. So the More Renewables takes the investment, it invests it in projects. So our initial plan was to do solar PV systems, and in the future perhaps do other sorts of renewable electricity. And at that point in 2011, there was quite a high rate of feed-in tariff, so we were planning to provide the electricity for free to the organisations which hosted our solar PV systems. So we were looking at putting it on schools, church halls, community centres, and they would give us a lease for the use of their roof. And then our income would be the feed-in tariff, which you could get at that point. And this would provide funding for local energy efficiency projects and to provide a return to our investors in the form of share interest and eventually to pay them their capital back. So that was our plan. And this is sort of saying about what we've actually done, which doesn't quite accord with the plan, but we've done something, so that's good. So we've done 3 different share offers in 2012, 13 and 14 for solar PV and for a biomass boiler. And at one point we had 46 members. Our annual income now is about a bit over 20,000, so we're not enormous. And we paid, and we're paying 4%. Now we're paying 4% to our investors, as we said when we did the first share offer. And at the end of 2022, we had 37 members and share capital of 141,000 and assets of a bit over that. So, and that meant that we're actually now, because for a long time, because we'd put in a load of funding to start with, while we had an accumulated loss, and now we're at the position where we are in surplus, and which has happened sooner than we thought it would. So that's the important thing. So we're doing okay, but perhaps we haven't grown as much and done as much as we'd initially planned. So I'll just talk about the projects that we have done. So this is the Lancaster co-housing site, which consists of a load of new build terraces on the river just upstream of Lancaster at a village called Halton. So they built a load of new terraces, and then they've converted an old mill building, which isn't shown in this picture. We put panels on the roofs of those terraces and the mill building. And we did it in 2 lots, in 2012 while they were building it, and in 2014. That was because, well, there were reasons why we did that. why we did it in 2 lots. But the important thing there is that it supplies electricity to a private wire network. So the Lancaster co-housing have a substation next door to the Electricity Northwest substation, and our electricity feeds into the upstream of that substation, as does electricity from Horton Loon Hydro, who are a bit further upstream. So that's another community energy project done by a group who are based in Horton, in the village in Horton. They're also a community benefit society. So so we sell all our electricity to Lancaster co-housing, and then they sell it on to the homes and offices, and they export it and get paid for the export when there is a surplus. So, and we also did this little project at Horton Women's Holiday Centre, which perhaps you might think is a little far out. So Horton's in the Upper Ribble Valley, and you might think that's a little bit far out from Morecambe Bay. But it's partly because we just knew people who were involved in it, and they had a problem in that they had a coal-fired Rayburn or something like that, which broke down. And so we replaced their Rayburn. They didn't have the money to do it at the time, so we replaced their Rayburn with a pellet biomass boiler, and which did require a bit of maintenance, but not as much work as a coal-fired Rayburn. So they were quite happy with that, and we were able to provide them the funding from doing a share offer. And but they've now bought that from us. They had an agreement, and they knew at the time that after a while they would buy out of that system. And then in 2015, so we had a bit of money left over from these share offers that we'd already done, and we did a small system at the Lancaster Boys and Girls Club. And importantly, we used a shared ownership agreement which we'd developed for the biomass boiler, and that was because there were issues to do with the insurance of the boiler, which if we'd had to pay the insurance would have made it prohibitively expensive. So instead, the Horton Women's Holiday Centre put it on their insurance. But I think initially we thought they couldn't do that unless they had some ownership of it, rather than just having a sort of lease type agreement with us. So yeah, so we used that we also did that agreement with the Boys and Girls Club, and it's a sort of profit share agreement that we have a sort of open accounting system where we tell them what our income and expenditure is on the system, and basically when we've covered all our costs, including paying share interest on the share capital, then the system becomes theirs. But it's the shares, the risks and rewards between the two organisations. It means we don't make lots of money, but I think it's a good way of working with, particularly with a small organisation like this, or where you're not really quite sure how successful it's going to be financially. So that's me and some other people from the centre there in 2015. And we installed that in 2015, and then later on in 2015 we had the Tories got in, and we rather gave up on looking for new projects, so we haven't done any new projects since 2014. So I'm now going to talk a bit about how to do this, what we've learned, and how to do community energy. And I think the first thing I remember going to, so as I said earlier, find out, which I don't say here, find out what people are doing elsewhere, and importantly, for example, I went to an event at the Lancaster University that was about how to do community energy, and it was really useful. And I think the main thing I got out of it was it said form your team, and I thought, yeah, this is what I really need to do to start with, is to get the right people involved. And so I sort of did a bit of recruitment in terms of putting information out through various networks, but also asked people that I thought would be good to work with and that knew that had the right skills, people that I knew. So we had a group of us, about 8-10 of us, that met, you know, quite regularly over the summer in 2011 on setting up the organisation and thinking about projects and all that sort of stuff. And then when we actually formed the organisation, not all those people then became directors, but it was good to have that wider group involved to start with. So then you form your team, you set up an organisation, and really there are alternatives, but most community energy organisations are community benefit societies. And you can get help with setting up one of these from the Business Support for Co-ops programme, which is run by Cooperatives UK. And then you've got to find your projects, and this is the most difficult thing. And if you bear that in mind when forming your team, because I think one of the reasons why we haven't grown sufficiently in more renewables is that we haven't managed to reach out to the right people that own the right sort of buildings that we want to do. So the projects that we have done have all because we've personally known key people involved in those organisations. And so getting people that own or have control, have a say over, you know, over the sort of buildings that you want to put solar PV on, getting them involved or having good links with them is really critical, I think. And with the local authority as well. I mean, we've sort of completely failed with, we went to see Lancashire County Council at an early stage about doing projects on the schools, and they were, has somebody got some interference? Somebody, thanks. And they were like, and they said, oh, well, there's all these free electricity solar PV schools that we need to write a policy before we can let any of our schools sign a lease with these people. And I remember saying, well, how long do you think that will take? And they said, oh, it'll take about 6 months. And I said, well, by then there won't be any of these free electricity things available. So they did come up with a policy in the end, which at a later date we were talking to a school we had a look at, but it was rather onerous as to the things we had to do. We ended up not doing a project with that school. It didn't really have a suitable roof. Anyway, so this is another sort of slide that shows the sort of different stages that you have to do. So you've got your startup, and you might have costs associated with that. So you could apply for a grant. We haven't had any grants apart from support from what was then called the Hive, which is now the Cooperatives Business Support, which was basically for an advisor, 4 days or whatever, of an advisor to help us with writing our rules and that sort of stuff, and setting up the organisation and looking at our offer document. So that was really useful. But other than that, we actually all put in, some of the directors put in some of their own money as a loan for setting up the organisation. So and then you've got the finance that you need to develop a project. Now, this varies according to the scale that you want to do, whether you want to pay consultants to go out and find projects for you, or to design them and develop them, or whether you want to do something bigger like a hydro or a wind. Hydro and wind take a lot of time. They require planning. Hydro in particular, you have to get all these meet the requirements of the Environment Agency, and there's often a lot of land issues. So there's a lot of work, and that costs money, and you need to find that money, which is at risk because the project might not end up going ahead. So once you've got your project that according to your projections stacks up financially, you then need to get the money to install the project, and that is easier probably than getting the other money. You can do it so I'm going to talk a bit about community shares, which is how we've raised our funding, or you can get loans or other grant funding. So that all takes, that's sort of about the process. And then the main issues, as I said before, the difficult thing is finding the projects. They need to be technically suitable and financially viable, which at the moment really means you need to be able to sell the electricity at a high proportion of what you generate at a reasonable rate to the building, a direct wire to the building or the other, or however. And you need a willing site owner. And I think this is the critical thing, really. You want somebody who wants to work with you, who wants to do the renewable energy and is interested in working with a community organisation. And often I feel that it works best if you're working with a sort of similar organisation to what you are. So I know that, you know, I've heard of people, there's an organisation in Oxford who I talked to early on, and well, I went to talks that they'd done, and I remember them saying that they'd done a project at Asda, and it was, you know, really just that Asda pay lots of solicitors and things, and they had a lot of I think it was Asda or a big supermarket. Anyway, it was much more difficult to work with them than to work with some of the other organisations they'd worked with, just because of the nature of the organisation they are and their financial resources to throw at solicitors and all the things they want signed off. So think about what sort of organisations you could best work with, and it's finding those willing organisations that's the critical thing. Yeah, and then you develop, so the key, the issue is getting finance that's at risk that you can spend on that development phase. And the other problem might be competition from private developers, or you do a load of work on looking at a project and then the organisation just decides to do it themselves. And you might think, well, that's fine because they've gone ahead and done renewable energy, and perhaps they wouldn't have done otherwise. But it can be, if you've spent some of your resources on it, that can be a bit of a problem. So you might need to try and do have some sort of agreement with people before you put a lot of work into that. They're actually going to go with you before you put lots of work into it. So, and then there's just a little bit about evaluating solar PV projects, which is really fairly straightforward compared to wind, where I think it's not easy to tell whether a site is good for wind. Then for solar PV, you basically need a large, preferably south-facing roof, though east-west can also work, unshaded, and it needs to be in good condition so it can support the panels. And the best roofing material is industrial metal roofs. Slates aren't so good. It costs more to put solar panels on a slate roof than it does on a metal roof. And critically, on a building that will use the electricity. So this is a problem with lots of community centres, for example, where you might think, oh, it'd be really good to be able to give this community centre, you know, to work with the community centre on putting solar panels on their roof, but they might not have much daytime use. I mean, now with batteries becoming more viable, it might be better, but you know, that's another cost. The batteries, it's another of the capital cost that you've got to recover. And I said sufficient daytime use on 1 fiscal metre, because you have to remember that the solar panel from your array has to feed into a particular metre. So the electricity feeds in on the building side of which is then connects. So that's the meter that measures what is imported and possibly what is exported from the property. So feeds in onto the building side of that, and clearly it can only do that on one of those, unless you split your array up and have more inverters and that sort of stuff. But that's getting more complicated. Then you're getting into multiple smaller systems rather than one big system, which is more economical to do. So just to say, this is the last of my slides, so we've got plenty. Just to say a bit more about community shares. And because often people don't understand the difference between the community shares and shares in companies. community shares, the shares are withdrawable share capital in societies. That means that they can't be sold to somebody else, so they can't be traded. And because they can't be traded, there's no market for them. They can't go up in value. They can go down in value if the society decides that thinks that its liabilities exceed its assets, and then the directors can decide to write down the value of the shares. And then when people withdraw their share capital from the society, so that's what withdrawability means, that basically the society can pay you back your capital, and that's you withdrawing your shares. So if they've written down the value, then you'll get the new lower value, so you'll lose some of your money. So offers of withdrawable share capital are unregulated because the shares aren't considered to be financial assets under all the various financial regulations that regulate markets. So that means that, unlike if you were a company doing a public offer of shares, then there's lots of sort of hoops you've got to jump through and expensive people you've got to pay to check all your documentation. You don't have to do that with community shares. Basically, a society can put out a share offer and then ask people to invest, and it doesn't have to do anything really. But the directors are responsible for what it says in the share offer. So, you know, if they say something misleading, then people that bought the shares could then sue the directors if they've, but it's not under the regulations that regulate the financial markets. So shareholders, so people that buy shares then become members of the society, and it's the members that collectively own the society, and they get one member, one vote. They don't get, in community benefit societies, members don't get aren't given a distribution of the profits. What they get is share interest, which is, so the shares are like, the money invested is a bit of a, it's a sort of hybrid, if you like, between a loan and share capital in a company, because you've got your membership, and through the membership you've got ownership, but you get paid interest, share interest. But that share interest must only be sufficient to attract and retain the capital. That's the wording that's used in lots of rules and things, and so it's not something where you can, if the society does really well, it can't decide to pay their members a higher rate of share interest than it promised in the share offer. It can only increase the rate of share interest really if it's getting lots of requests for withdrawals and it needs to retain the capital. So it then could increase the interest rate to people for withdrawing their capital. Yeah, so, and then again, that share's not being transferable, and that they withdraw as well as it can be suspended by the society. So it's not like putting your money in a bank where you've got a right to withdraw your money at any point. The directors can say, well, we just can't afford to pay back share capital at the moment, and so they can, so it means you haven't got a guarantee of getting your money back when you want it. So yeah, so the other thing that I haven't mentioned on there is that community benefit societies are for the benefit of the community, and if they're dissolved, for example, any assets have to be after paying back share capital and its creditors, they have to the benefit of the community. They can't be distributed to its members. Cooperative societies, on the other hand, for the benefit of their members, but the members have to have some sort of trading relationship with the society, either workers' co-ops effectively or consumer co-ops. So best practice because the offers are unregulated, the cooperative movement, if you like, has tried to head off any sort of pressure for regulation by promoting best practice in community shares. The community, there's a community shares unit within Cooperatives UK, which has produced a handbook that sets out, tells you all about how societies work, society legislation and shares and all that sort of stuff. And they've also developed a standard mark for community share offers, and then they've trained a load of people to be able to award that standard mark, and they're licensed community shares practitioners. So I've done that training as after doing the more renewable share offers. I sort of got into it and went and did the training. So I've then helped lots of other societies do offers and develop renewable energy projects. So that's it. So that's me and my details. So you can find us morerenewables.co.uk. Right now, how do I? So I should stop sharing. Oh, I've done half an hour. Is that okay? That was about right, wasn't it? I hope.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. So I know that there was a question from Andrew, and I'm not sure whether you already answered that. So would shares not increase?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
The number of projects you develop, they're tied to the price.
Yeah.
So how it works is that the shares are valued at £1. And that means that you sell the share and you get £1 for the share. And when somebody withdraws that shares, they're paid £1. And basically that's it. The value of if the society, so the shares might, it says shares increase. Now the number of shares might increase in the society when you sell more shares, when you do another project and you need more capital and you go out and do another share offer, as we've done for 3 different share offers. Go out and do another share offer, you get more shares. So you get more shares, but they're still just worth £1 each. Is that explained it? It's not like, you have to think, societies are not companies. There's a whole different regulatory framework for societies. So societies have rules, for example, and whereas and are registered with the Financial Conduct Authority, companies have what's it called, memorandum and articles of association, and they're registered at Companies House. And there's a whole different, a share in a company is not the same as a share in a society.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from the audience? Yes, Elke.
Hi, thank you so much for your really interesting talk. Do you think you would have been able to do this now? Because you were mentioning at the beginning, you know, at the time when you were starting this project, there were quite positive feed-in tariffs, so you could actually make money from it. Do you think you would be able to start a project like this now, where the feed-in tariffs are gone?
Well, with the recent increases in electricity prices, there has been a bit of a flurry of more renewable energy projects. So yes, but you need, as I go, you need those things that I talked about, like a big roof and a decent price of the electricity, because you need to get all the money needs to come from selling the electricity. When we started off in 2011, the feed-in tariff rate was really, well, it's like, it was 40 pence or something for the smaller scale system. And anyway, and it was due to go down in the March 2012. And so all these people were busy trying to develop projects to install before March 2012. And then at the end of October, the government produced this consultation paper saying that they were going to reduce the rate, like on the 8th of December, and reduce it by half. So we were in that position. We were doing all these projects. We were trying to get all these organisations on board, and then it just got, you know, the rug got pulled out under our feet. by these. And then in the end, because we were part of a legal challenge to that, and they didn't reduce it until February. But it's like as soon as the consultation paper came out, we sort of gave up really trying to get those projects. So, but then fortunately the next year we did manage to do the project with Lancaster Co-housing.
Thank you. Now the next question is from Andrew.
Afternoon. I wonder if you could just explain a bit more about, excuse me, the biomass boiler project, because I couldn't quite understand how you were managing to pay for that. Was it supported from the other projects, or was it just you were kind of giving it over as a just cause to the site where it was?
No, it was so we did a share offer. It cost about 18,000 or something. We did a share offer for 20,000, and we paid for almost all of it, but had the share ownership agreement. And then we got the renewable heat incentive. So we received income from the renewable heat incentive, and they paid us a bit for every unit of heat they generated. I think they bought the pellets. They paid for the pellets.
I see. Because we're working on a scheme in Preston right now, and I was just trying to work out how you paid the shares back to people from that project. But I guess because you got the renewable heat incentive, that's what able to do that. Gotcha. Thank you.
Which doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. So you need to, people need to pay.
Thank you. So now we have a question from Paul.
Yeah, hi. So I was interested in the mechanism of actually issuing the share offer. Did you use some kind of specialist organisation, or did you have the expertise yourself?
No, we didn't use anybody else. We basically wrote the offer. We got it checked by the consultants that had helped us with this, setting up the organisation and writing the rules. So we got them to check it. This was before the days of the community shard. And then we just publicised it and locally, and we got a lot of local interest. So I think it was more difficult than we thought it was. So it does, you shouldn't underestimate the work you have to do in marketing your share offer. So yes, but we managed to say, so if we were doing something bigger, we might go to, there are these various platforms like FX or Crowdfunder that host these sort of investments that you can use, but they take a cut. And also you need to think about whether you think you can raise the money locally, which we thought we could, or whether you need to draw on a bigger investment community, because people like FX or even like Energy for All or Share Energy. So they're Energy for All and Share Energy are organisations that help people set up renewable energy societies, and they also do the admin and run the share offer for you and all that sort of thing, plus do all the stuff to do with working out whether your project's viable and things. So they have big databases of people that are likely to do this stuff. So that's handy. But if you think you can raise the money locally and want local members, then you can do it yourself.
So is there a lot of, there must be a lot of logistics and administration, and they just kind of...
Well, it's not enormous. You needed it. So we did it. I mean, now you might all be able to do it through a website and emails, and we had people sending in paper forms and checks that we then paid into the bank. So or you get people to do bank transfers. So there's a bit of admin, and we used this community interest company that I talked about. they did our admin for us. And
So-
they actually, in the early days, they employed somebody for us to work on the developing the share offer and doing the admin.
Okay.
So that's often community energy societies are sort of started by another group in a place, and then they, and that other group helps them in terms of holding funding or employing people, or
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from the audience? Oh, Chris.
Hi, thank you, Marcello, and that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. I see that Kate has got her hand up, Kate Gilmartin from British Hydropower Association, and I was going to actually just bring her in, and also Tim Ashworth from Wally Hydro, because I think I'd be interested to hear, especially Tim's view, having done a community hydropower project, the different experience that he has had compared to, say, Anne's with this solar and bio boiler projects. But also, Kate, she's already got her hand up, so I'm not going to preempt what she's going to say. But maybe Tim, would you be willing to kind of share your own experience from your own project? Thank you.
You're muted, Tim. You're muted.
I'll unmute you. There you go.
He's still muted.
Tim, let me see if I can help you. Oh, no, I can't. I don't have the power to do that. Marcello, you might have.
No, I don't actually. So, oh.
Tim, the technology is conspire. Oh, there you go.
That should be
There you go.
unmuted now.
We can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, the hydro is an interesting case. We started the whole project back in 2010, I guess, originally. Hydro now, of course, is very difficult to promote because of the initial very high cost of the planning and the build itself, and so on and so on. We actually ended up raising £750,000. We're producing 100 kilowatts of hydro from that. And it is going very, very, very well, I have to say. Interestingly, the investors, when we did a little survey, were 70% in the local area code. 70%. Very, very local investment. The rest came from really friends of people, largely, who were in the area and got others interested. And the majority, when we asked them, said that they were making an investment on sort of ethical grounds, if you like, promoting renewable energy, rather than for the financial return. We've been able to offer and pay out a 5% rate of interest, with one exception, and that was really just one poor year of production, because of course hydro depends absolutely on the volume of water that you've got in the river, and either too little or even too much, surprisingly perhaps for some people, creates a problem. So it varies from year to year, more perhaps than would solar or biomass or whatever else that, or even wind. We opened up with 4 directors and a secretary who were all locals. How it came together is quite interesting, but I won't bore you with all that. it was a subject that I did cover in a recent seminar in Clitheroe, which probably you do have access to. And we've unfortunately lost a couple of those original directors recently. So we're in a situation where we are recruiting. And that was one of the reasons that I decided to listen in today, because there are other community benefit societies, I'm sure, who are in a similar situation. You will find that the majority of people who offer their assistance in running these schemes, as well as investors, are very often somewhat elderly people. So there is something of a natural wastage, terrible way to express it, along the route. And at the end of the day, of course, nearly all of us, I guess, will have drawn on the feed-in tariff, which ends in 2034, and of course are having to make plans to cope with that situation. Just on that subject, it's interesting that when we started up, the feed-in tariff represented something like 75% of our income. This last financial year, we've just had the AGM, the feed-in tariff and our sale of electricity, which we do through Good Energy, were pretty much equal. But of course, we cannot rely on that in the future. So hence the importance of planning. Might be 11 years away. But if you're running a particularly mechanical plant like we are, you of course start to incur higher costs, particularly in terms of electrical and mechanical, not just maintenance, but replacement before too long. We've been running now for the 9 years, and that translates into 27,000 hours of running mechanical plant. So that's just a very brief summary of perhaps the problems that we face, as well as the huge benefit that we gain from having such a very, very willing investors. Thank you.
Now we've got a question from Kate.
Hi there. Yeah, hi Anne, that was really good. And yeah, just second everything you're saying. What was I going to say? I can't remember now. Yes, I was going to ask. Oh, well, I was just going to make a comment on Tim and the funders. So according to Energy for All and Share Energy, they did a bit of work looking at who funds local projects. And it really depends on the project itself. So they tend to talk about a community, not necessarily of locality, but a community of interest. So a project might be 20% funded locally, but other, like and Tim said, ethical funders from around the country. It's worth noting that shares can be transferred without inheritance tax as well. So when we were looking at a project up in Cumbria with Melbrake community interest company, the hydro, a few years ago before energy prices were higher, and we were looking at 0% interest because it was really hard to get the project stack up, and we were looking at it as a green legacy and actually looking at kind of those other benefits as well. I was just going to say as well, totally echo what Anne was saying in terms of look to see what other people are doing. These networks that we have here are so crucial. Look over people's shoulders, copy ideas. Tim and I have been chatting for a very long number of years through the Community Hydro Forum, which I set up about 12 years ago to do that, because so people weren't reinventing the wheel. So it's a really collaborative space, and make use of the people within these forums because they're always really willing to help. And yeah, lastly, I think I was just going to ask Anne, what's on your horizon now? What are you cooking up now?
What, for more renewables?
Yes, and generally, because you usually got some interesting stuff
Well,
going
we've
on.
got a possibility. I mean, after years of, say, in 2015, we rather gave up and we said, because before that we'd done lots of trying to get new projects and had spent a lot of time looking at all sorts of projects that hadn't come off. And then in 2015, we rather gave up. And my attitude now is somebody has to come to me to say, we want you to do this, rather than me trying to go out and persuade people. We've got a possibility of a ground-mounted solar project, but we're not sure if it's going to be viable or not. So that would take us up a scale, if you like, in terms of the our size. So that would be good, but I'm not holding the breath yet to see what happens. So yeah, so that's it really. I mean, I'm working, as I say, I'm working with groups elsewhere and looking at other people's share offers. So I know that there is community energy is starting to happen again after nothing for quite a few years. So we'll have to see. I mean, I think it's it's what happens to electricity prices, isn't it? That's the critical thing. And it hasn't got the long-term reliability that you got from FITs. With FITs, you knew what your income was going to be, so you've got that security, that sort of security there. Whereas the electricity prices might be what they are now, but everybody thinks that it was a blip and they're going to go down. But how much, for how long, it's all very difficult to know. And that's the thing with renewable energy, you pay all the money up front, and then you don't have a lot of ongoing costs, but put your money in and you need to know you're going to get it back over a time period. Our projects, by the way, for the Lancaster housing, where we've got a lease, we have a lease for 25 years. For part of it's for 25 years, the other part is for 20 years, because that was the feed-in tariff period. So initially you got the feed-in tariff for 25 years. So we signed the lease with them for that long, and then at the end of that time it becomes theirs. So the ownership transfers. So we don't have this problem of what we're going to do when we don't have the feed-in tariff, because basically we won't have the project either.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the time, so is there any another very quick question, or shall we close the session?
Sorry, Marcello, I'm just going to. Oh no, Andrew has a question. I was just going to make a comment though, just very briefly, that the price of solar PV technology has come down very, very rapidly over the last decade, notwithstanding recent problems with trying to get hold of certain kind of critical materials to make solar PV. If you look at the prices of solar PV from the time you started, and in 2011 to about 2021, okay, over that 10-year period, the price has come down 7 times. It's the cheapest way of producing electricity in most countries now. That's the reason why, when you had over 100 countries who introduced feed-in tariff policies to subsidize the introduction of solar about a dozen, 15 years ago, they found they didn't need to anymore, because solar PV installation globally was growing at about 20 to 30% a year. And it's now globally overtaken wind as in terms of installed rated power capacity. So that's kind of just an interesting background information. And you don't need feed-in tariff so much now to actually buy it. So when I first started to look at getting a solar PV system on my roof in 2011, the cost was £25,000, okay, for 11 or 12 panels. When I installed them 2 years ago in March 2011, it was £4,000. Okay, so it's gone down from 25,000 for the same number of panels down to 4,000, and that was mainly due to the fact that China now makes 80% of all solar panels. They can do it very competitively, but that's another matter. So
But
just a little
there
point
is an
there to
issue
make.
there about the slave labour and
Yes, there is
all
the
that sort of
Uyghur.
stuff, yeah.
Yes, there is.
And I
That's
think
why
there's
it's a,
also
yeah.
there's a limit to how much, because a lot of the cost, of course, is people put the scaffolding up, the work. So there's not just the panels, there's also the labour that has to go into it.
Yeah.
And but one thing that has happened is that the panels have become more higher output. So you
Yeah.
don't need so many panels to get, so that does reduce your installation costs as well, because you just don't need so many panels to.
Yes.
But yeah,
Yes.
and batteries make, I mean, we've got some on our house now with a battery, and I think that makes an enormous difference.
I have as well. Yeah.
To, because then you can use the electricity and without the feed-in tariff, you need to use the electricity.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. I think Andrew's got one last question, Marcello, or point.
Yes, sorry, it was a question for Tim actually about the hydro project. So I wondered if your share offer was the same as Anne's, so were people buying them for £1 a share? And you said that 70% of your investors were local. What do you define as local? Is that like on the River Loon, or is it like the northwest or around Lancaster?
No, it's actually in the BB postcode, as local as that.
Wow.
And in fact, all the community benefits that we've been able to subscribe to, which are very largely solar mounted on primary school roofs or village hall roofs, are also literally within about a 5-6 mile radius. So it really is local energy, local community energy. It's worked out very nicely.
Brilliant.
You're on the Ribble, aren't you?
Sorry?
It's on the Ribble.
It's
Your
on the
hydro.
Calder, actually,
Oh, the
which flows
Calder.
into
Oh,
the
Goes
Ribble.
into the Ribble, yeah.
Right alongside Worley Village. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we could not persuade the Environment Agency to run a line across the weir. They weren't for doing that at all, to provide sort of local housing or anything like that. So we are feeding the grid and selling the electricity, as I say, through good energy. We're looking at other alternatives right now.
That makes a big difference, you see, if you can sell directly, because the price that an organisation pays for, or anybody pays for electricity, is much higher than what you can get by selling the electricity into
Yes.
So
Well,
having an off-taker, as it's called,
we are a bit worried
can
about
make a
the
big
legal
difference.
costs involved, and any advice on that would be very gratefully received. Because you have to obviously to form an agreement with the outfit that you are supplying to.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is looking like it's rather costly.
Yeah, but there are sort of PPAs. Lots of community organisations have PPAs. Ours is just set out in the lease. But other people have a separate PPA.
Yes.
Power purchase agreement. So
It's
Paul,
normal to set that. Sorry, it's normal to set that up though before the event, so to speak.
Oh yeah.
Whereas
yeah.
we've been running a long time and are looking at the alternative to just going with the open market through good energy.
Yeah.
And keeping the whole thing, as we said in our original prospectus, local energy for local consumption.
Yeah.
Part of the ethic.
Yeah.
If I can just add quickly that Tim, Anne, Paul and Andrew, you're all working on community energy projects. I know Paul and Andrew are working on the Community Energy Preston project. What we're trying to do in Lancashire Climate Action Network, LancsCAN, is to bring you all together to continue these conversations about what to do with community energy. So we're trying to form these kind of subgroups within LancsCAN. More about that later on this month. So this will be the start of a conversation. I know you probably know each other, but we're going to try to facilitate further dialogues.
Paul, do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to come back to Tim actually and say, have you looked at organisations such as Local Energy? That's an organisation that forms cooperatives between local residents and local producers, and as long as they're in the same substation area, they have a mechanism for the energy you produce being sold direct to the other people in the cooperative. I think they do that through Octopus Energy and one other supplier that facilitates it for them. So I can probably put you in touch with somebody from them if that's of any interest to you.
That certainly would be. I know we're out of time, Paul, but if you could send that through, you'll get the email address off the internet. So that would be very, very useful. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for all the questions. It's been an excellent talk, and thank you for attending. And I will make sure the recording is made available shortly. And so I'd like to thank Anne again, and again, all of you for attending.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Anne. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Yeah. Cheers.
Bye.
Take care.